I set you on this path.
And we knew where it could lead. Walk with me the rest of the way.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
All right, it's time for more custom cards, and this time around I have some legendary weapons made by you guys. That said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these amazing designs. Up first here we have the Claw of N'Zoth, a pretty timely card. N'Zoth coming back into standard format of Hearthstone tomorrow as of publishing this video, and also we just saw the Visions of N'Zoth preview for the next big update in World of Warcraft. N'Zoth is everywhere these days, including this card from Spicy Raccoon. It's a 4-mana 0/3 for Warlock, and it reads, whenever you discard a Death Rattle card, activate its effect. So bringing back the Death Rattle stuff from N'Zoth, so nice synergy there, but also a really powerful little idea that brings discard synergies into play. And you guys know I love discard synergies anytime I can. I'm going to squeeze some good discard stuff in because I still think we haven't really gotten all the way on that archetype just yet. And that means it's amazing if you, for instance, discard a Sylvanas. You're going to activate Sylvanas' effect. And this weapon does not lose durability each time that happens, so you can keep doing that over and over again with cards like the Expired Merchant. That's a pretty awesome play. You could make Sylvanas the highest cost thing in your hand, get that going off regularly. You could even do like Anubis Defenders. Those are pretty high cost. Just keep discarding those and buffing your hand. There are all kinds of neat synergies for a card like this one. You could also just do low cost stuff if you wanted, discarding the lowest cost thing in your hand. Draw some cards with Loot Hoarders. Whatever it is, there are possibilities here that exist, and that's what makes a cool card like this so darn nifty. And of course, it's susceptible to weapon removal like every card in this list is, but because it has a cheap enough cost, it's not something that's also like a super pertinent threat, so your opponent might think they have a little time to get by before they remove it. And we saw in the past that zero attack weapons for Warlock can be meta relevant, so I certainly think this one has that chance too. All in all, pretty timely and pretty awesome card. Moving on here to Icarax's Wrath from Mr. Geddes. This is a 3-mana 4/1 weapon for Warrior, and it reads, attacking a damaged minion doesn't cost durability. So this is basically a kind of baby Gorehowl that has a condition. Gorehowl loses some attack, but it never loses its durability as long as you're hitting minions. And Icarax doesn't even lose the attack, so it remains this nice 4-attack weapon as long as you keep hitting damaged stuff. And that means, you know, if you set it up well, if you can take small little trades with tiny minions, if you can whirlwind boards, warpaths, etc., you might get 4 or 5 attacks out of this thing before it actually goes away and breaks because you finally just didn't have a way to set up a damage thing. Alternatively, you might kind of get stuck with it. If you don't have a way to damage anything, it might just be a one-time use desperation kind of card to kill, you know, like your opponent's Zorshai Cleric, just because it has to die. And I think it works in both ways, because 4 attack for 3 mana is pretty solid, right? That's much better than you might expect normally. Certainly, we've seen some things like Hook Scimitar to get to that level, but still, it gives you that in a pinch emergency answer as needed. And then also, if you can make it work, you get a lot of upside, maybe 3-4 attacks, and that's amazing for a 3-mana weapon. That would be fantastic. So I love that it synergizes with what Warrior's about. I love that it pulls Icarax, the Plague Lord of Death. That's a really cool reference for a card like this. Great artwork choice, really cool conditional effect, works really well for everything about the class and like the kind of decision points you have to make with this card. So this is pretty much a perfect weapon design as far as I'm concerned. Up next here, I have the Barricade of Eternity from Jordan Smileyface, a 4-mana weapon for Paladin. It's a 0/3, which I think it's pretty cool to see a 0-attack weapon in a class that normally has weapons with damage. And it reads, after your hero takes damage, restore 1 health to your hero. So essentially a long-term heal effect here that kind of negates all damage you take by 1 because you're immediately healing it back. So 1-attack minions don't really do anything. Could even punish the opponent if you have, you know, say played High Priest the Call first. That's not going to be good for them. And you're still just limiting their damage output, which is really nice over the course of an entire game. This could add up to tons of damage negation. Also just lots of free healing to activate all kinds of heal synergy cards as well. And we still haven't really seen Heal Paladin become a thing. Certainly they've used healing in like OTK Paladin, but we never saw the true heal synergy package get there for Paladin. A card like this would be a great way to help contribute to that. Just something that works over time, slows down your opponent, gets you some reliable healing without spending extra mana in the future, so it's like a one-time investment for potentially pretty big long-term heals. All of those things sound great. It also just feels very Paladin-esque. You know, a big shield, very defensive style effect. It feels heroic and knightly and paladin-like. So I think this is a really cool design. We haven't seen a lot of this sort of stuff in the game yet, and although it's something that constantly comes up in card designs, these sideways weapons that do something other than just like attack or affect the board immediately, I want to see those in the game, so designs like this certainly catch my eye. Moving on here to another paladin weapon from Hollow. This is the Corrupted Ashbringer. I think probably the most submitted weapon of all in this particular submission period. And this one's an 8 mana 5/3 with Lifesteal and Death Rattle. Summon High Lord Darian Mograine. And Mograine, in this instance, unlike the Uther instance, is a 6/6 with Taunt. So you'll note pretty quickly what's happening here. This is basically a reverse Tyrian Forging. So instead of playing a 6/6 minion that gives you an Ashbringer, you're instead going to play an Ashbringer that gives you a 6/6 minion, which I think, by the way, is a super fun idea. It's a corrupted Ashbringer, so you're kind of flipping everything backwards, doing it the opposite way. And that's just like so simple and kind of graceful of an execution as far as I'm concerned. Now, Darian does not have Divine Shield like Tyrian, but the Corrupted Ashbringer has Lifesteal, which makes sense because if you're going to bonus bundle an effect into it, you want it on the thing that's happening immediately, right? Which is your Ashbringer, much like Tyrian has the Divine Shield immediately, and the weapon's a little bit more simplistic. So even that is a pretty smart decision here, not to mention perhaps just fitting for a more Death Knight-oriented weapon. They have some Lifesteal style effects. So the Corrupted Ashbringer is pretty solid for 8 mana, right? Like a 5/3 with Lifesteal weapon, that feels good. If your opponent removes the weapon, which is going to be their natural inclination, then you get a big minion. So a lot of stuff here for 8 mana, much like Tyrian. I think this would be a very solid card. Lots of Paladins could run successfully. Could be the top end of an aggro deck, could still fit into a control deck rather nicely as well. So I think this design is effective, simple and smart in its execution, and just a great World of Warcraft lore reference as well. So a lot of things work very, very well here. Moving on to Amari the Scale Blessed from Beastie Hedgehog. This is a priest weapon, which is intriguing. 4 mana 4/2, and it reads Battlecry, silence your opponent's weapon and gain its effect. Which, really cool idea, right? This is something we haven't seen yet in Hearthstone, which is silencing weapons. We've had a lot of weapon removal in Hearthstone, but sometimes weapons have things like death rattles, and you don't really want to destroy them, like our last weapon, for instance. But Amari the Scale Blessed would be the perfect sort of thing to counter that, and it certainly makes sense for Priest, a class that uses a lot of silence style effects, to give them the silencing weapon. And the fact that it also borrows the effect, kind of steals it from your opponent, that's really cool too. That seems to fit Priest's game plan rather nicely as well. So yeah, you could steal some amazing weapon effects. Sometimes it wouldn't do much, right? Because it's not really weapon removal. So if they just had a weapon where the effect didn't matter to you, or an effectless weapon like your Fiery War Axes of the world, this would just be a 4 mana 4/2, which is still really good. Like, that would probably be playable because Priest is a class otherwise without good weapon access. Now, I'll be honest, I would have changed the stat line on this weapon. I probably would have made this something like a 1/3. Or maybe like a 2/4 if you're really, really pushing it. Maybe like a 2/3 is fine. The reason for that is I think durability is more interesting when you're looking at weapon effects. If they're doing things, you want more instances of them doing things. Also, high attacks on a weapon just don't feel super priestly to me. So even though this is like a big sword-looking thing, I think a lower attack would have felt a little bit better. That said, I still liked the design idea, the mechanic being captured here so well. Everything else about this card was really well done. So willing to overlook the slight difference of opinion there. I probably would have shifted those stat lines, and I think this one would be A+ perfect, but still a really, really strong card. So next up here, let's take a look at the Great Staff Atiesh. We saw Atiesh in the game previously, coming off of Medivh, but not a collectible version. This one from Creed makes it collectible. It's also a tri-class card here for the caster classes, Mage, Warlock, and Priest. It's a 1/3, much like the previous version of Atiesh, but it comes in at 7 mana instead, and it reads, after your hero attacks, cast a random spell from your hand on the same target. So essentially here, Atiyesh allows you to kind of bank some future mana discounts on spells. And what I mean by that is, like the turn you play Atiyesh, you attack, it casts a random spell. Maybe that wasn't worth much, right? Because you spent 7 mana on Atiyesh. If you get like a 7 mana spell, you broke even. If you get like a 10 mana spell, maybe you're a few mana ahead, but not a hugely significant discount, right? So the first turn you play this is probably pretty weak. But if it can attack a second or third time, that means you're not spending mana for those second and third spells. You're getting some potentially powerful stuff out there basically for free, only by attacking, reserving the rest of your mana pool to do whatever else you want. Now, there are some intriguing implications for a card like this. When it says the same target, I don't know if that is intended to mean that if, say, you attacked face and it cast, say, Scorch, a spell that normally only targets minions, could you scorch the enemy's face, right? Would you be allowed to deal damage to their face on a minion-based spell? I'm going to leave that up to you guys to debate. I think probably it still wouldn't work. It would just fizzle, so it would have to align the right targets. But regardless, you know, still with Pyroblasts and Fireballs, those could certainly just be aimed face. Flame Strikes do a universal thing. Secrets, all kinds of spells work anyway, which means this gives you a way to potentially cheat out lots of extra stuff as long as your opponent doesn't react to this weapon and have any sort of removal. So pretty cool idea here, I think, as far as allowing you to bank that value. And I like the idea of a caster weapon that multiple classes can use. We haven't seen a weapon that's lived outside of a class in the collection manager. This would be the first one, so that would be pretty sweet as well. And the return of a real legendary weapon in World of Warcraft is something I'd love to see in Hearthstone. So some pretty nifty ideas explored with this one. Next up here is the Skull of Gul'dan from Tat Guy Nick. I know there's a missing apostrophe in the name. I'm going to live with it. It's a 2-mana 0/1 weapon for Warlock, and it's another discard synergy card. It reads, whenever you discard this card, return it to your hand and give it +1/+1. So pretty quickly, this becomes an interesting weapon, right? If you discard it once, it's a 1/2, not that exciting. But if you discard it twice, it's a 2/3, which starts to feel better. If you discard it a third time, it's a 3/4, which is amazing. If you can somehow discard this, 5-6 times, you got yourself a crazy 2-mana weapon. The problem is it takes a while to get it spinning, so it has to be a weapon that's worth something late in the game. But there are some breakpoints where I think it's really good. 3/4, 4/5, it becomes very significantly powerful and cheap. And you might say, well, gosh, that's a lot of discards, Regis. It's so hard to discard this. But it's not. If it's one of the lowest cost cards in your hand, there are still a ton of low cost discard synergy options out there that would make this very easy to discard, right? Mostly the Rostakon's Rumble set, the Shriek cards out there. So Skull of Gul'dan could actually be tossed out of your hand pretty consistently and turn into a very powerful asset late in the game. Now, it's still probably not like a game-winning sort of asset, but it's just something that allows you to play discard cards without penalty and instead bonus. And that's exactly what discard decks need. They need ways to discard things while it's accruing good things and bonuses instead of just always being a loss of resources. So Skull of Gul'dan fits very naturally into that element. I think it's a pretty cool idea. I might even ramp the stats up faster, to be honest. Maybe like +2/+2, so it becomes a really threatening weapon when you discard it enough. But I like the idea captured here. So, of course I do, because it's a discard card, right? Free bonus points to everybody for discard cards. But good idea captured here. Certainly another fitting card for Warcraft lore, and all in all, a pretty neat idea on a non-weapon class weapon. Next up here is Muramasa for Rogue from Pizza Cat. It's a 5-mana 2/4 weapon with Poisonous and Lifesteal, but after attacking, you destroy a random friendly minion. So we've got here a weapon with some ridiculous removal upside, right? Being able to kill 4 minions outright thanks to Poisonous is really good. The Lifesteal means that you will reduce the amount of damage taken in the process, so you're not killing yourself as quickly with this sort of weapon. But if you're going to take that upside, you are going to lose some minions in the process. Now, that may seem like a really bad thing, but keep in mind, things like Death Rattle Rogue might not mind killing minions. In fact, it might be a bonus. If they have Mechanical Whelps on the board, playing a Muramasa and attacking, it's going to feel great because you're going to get good removal, some life gain, and you're going to summon a 7/7 in the process of doing that. So I think this is a really cool way to support a Death Rattle Rogue deck with exactly what they need. We've already got, of course, Necreum Blade, Necreum Vial style cards for Death Rattle Rogue. This kind of adds another element there that would probably just help you follow up on curve or give you more consistency in activating those Death Rattle style effects. And it does it in a really cool way, this idea of a blade that requires your own minion souls sort of to do its thing. Really cool example of a storyline happening within a card. Muramasa is certainly a fine subject for that as well. So all in all, something that supports a cool archetype, really neat design, some trade-offs that can be bonuses. Those are all great hallmarks of good design. Up next here, I have the Hand of Syrian from Cameron Cardoza, a druid weapon that's a 5-mana 5/1 with lifesteal, and it reads, if you have any unspent mana at the end of your turn, gain +1 durability. So I love the idea of taking the unspent mana mechanic for druid and making it this long-term sort of thing. Right now with the quest, it's like you do it and you're done. And although you have things like Crystal Merchant, which could theoretically extend the need to leave unspent mana, in most cases, after 4 or 5 turns, you don't care. You're happy to spend all your mana. But with Hand of Syrian, suddenly you have to think about every turn not spending that mana to ensure that this weapon continues to get value over time. And the other thing about Hand of Syrian is you can't attack immediately with it, lest you won't have a chance to end your turn with unspent mana. So you're kind of investing 5 mana in something that doesn't really do anything right now, but long term has some very big bonuses and upsides if you can manage to make it work well. But there's always this kind of dilemma, right? If you're attacking every turn, keeping unspent mana can be tough. You may eventually break the weapon. And of course, as always, still susceptible to all kinds of weapon removal out there, particularly because you're kind of playing it and not doing anything with it for a turn. It's particularly susceptible. So some all kinds of neat little friction things happening with this card where operating it is not as simple as just playing it and attacking. You have to make decisions, think about your game plan, think about your mana, etc. Now, there's another thing I want to discuss with this card, which is the Druid weapon problem with Twig of the World Tree out there in wild format. As soon as that card is broken, its Death Rattle activates and you gain a ton of mana. So giving Druid another weapon is a little risky. That's already possible with Blingtron in wild format. It's not something you see a ton. So I think adding, one more legendary weapon wouldn't really hurt that much because it is a legendary. It's hard to add a bunch of them into your deck. If it was non-legendary, you could add 2. It would really increase the consistency. But it's like drawing exactly Twig and exactly the second weapon, both of which are one-ofs, is much more difficult. So I'm willing to say that Druid can eventually get a weapon at some point. I think it's a problem. I think Twig of the World Tree could be fixed. So I'm not holding that against something like Hand of Syrian, because I think otherwise this card does a lot of really cool stuff. And then finally here we have one last weapon, and this one's going to cause some heated debate. It is the Steel Fist from Flavio Milani. It's a 6-mana 3/2 for Warrior, and the battle cry reads, replace your hero power with a second weapon slot and equip another Steel Fist. So yeah, we're breaking the game, and you're just going to have to deal with it. You're going to come at me and you're going to say, Regis, this doesn't work for a variety of reasons. The UI, the mechanics, the way Hearthstone plays doesn't support this. You attack with your hero, not your weapon. I get it. I understand. There are obviously client mechanic limitations for something like this, but I don't care. I think sometimes we have to make cards that break the game as we understand it if we want Hearthstone to evolve. We've seen some things like that happen in the past. Maybe not to this extent, but I think we can do this. Blizzard could figure out a way that instead of attacking with your hero when you have Steel Fist equipped, you attack with the left weapon and you attack with the right weapon. That's not insane. I'm just going to assume that's possible. And if so, I think that's a really cool idea because it means that you can basically split your attacks. So you could attack for 3 to a minion, and then you could attack for 3 to face separately. You could attack 3 to 2 individual minions. So all of the values not bundled into a single attack per turn. And you would not need Wind Fury to do that, presumably, right? You could also get Wind Fury, and perhaps you could attack 4 times. I don't know. That's problems that we can solve down the road. I just like the idea of this card. And I will say, Flavio sent a ton of descriptions for how this would work. He really put in some effort in explaining it. I'm going to assume it's just self-explanatory in some cases, so I'm not showcasing that or even really agreeing with all of the decisions made there, because I think it has to be intuitive, and Blizzard could solve that problem. So I love the idea of you equip one weapon that's for damage, one that's for removal, right? You've got an Arcanite Reaper and a Gorehowl. You use the Gorehowl on minions, you use the Arcanite Reaper to go face, right? There's all kinds of cool things you could do. You have weapons with effects that could suddenly stack up and do nifty things. So, for instance, Livewire Lances, you could get 2 lackeys per turn if you have 2 Livewire Lances. You could drop 2 bombs into your opponent's deck if you have multiple wrench calibers. There's all kinds of neat things that happen because of a card like Steel Fist. And although that's a lot of cool upside, you could run way more weapons in your deck, which can be a check right now. It's cool because you're losing your hero powers. You're taking a bit of a sacrifice and a hit here. So some trade-offs that are necessary to make a card like this make sense. So all in all, super cool idea as far as I'm concerned, and really neat as far as imaginativeness is concerned. Again, execution, we can solve that somewhere else. Blizzard can figure that out if a card like this were ever to exist, but I just like the idea of stretching the game a little further. Doing big, new, cool stuff is something Hearthstone needs as it starts to age, and this card delivers on that beautifully. And there you go, folks. Those are the 10 custom legendary weapons this time around. There were, 17, 18 really good weapons, maybe not quite enough for 2 videos, so I had to cut some solid cards here. Tried to focus on the ones that were a little bit bigger, more creative, challenged our understanding of the game a tad more, took some risks perhaps, but still delivered on good design conceits. That said, I'm sure you're curious about next time, so we're going to do a Lord of the Rings themed custom card next time. Your card has to be designed on something from Lord of the Rings, a character, a weapon, whatever it is, some kind of effect, spell, whatever. It just has to be from Lord of the Rings lore. Any kind of Lord of the Rings lore is fine. You can find descriptions on that in the, or details on that in the description below for submitting those cards. That said, thanks much as always for participating. Share your thoughts on these cards in the comments below. Thanks also for watching, and until next time, game on.